Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about testing in production. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, do you think that tests should run on the production system as well as the QA environment from time to time? Yes, I think so. Well, it really depends on how confident you are in your QA environment. So something that I like to say is that a QA environment is a very useful tool that you can have for manual testing or things of that nature, as long as you can trust that the QA environment is production-like or almost identical to production. Because the thing that happens is usually that you create something that is a test environment, but then when you come to when it comes to releasing to production, people still feel sort of scared of releasing into production because the QA environment doesn't really represent production. And so what I try to do and preach for in my teams is to get to a point where you have no fear of releasing into production, because the tests are running production. You are guaranteed that anything you have done in your development process, or like when you release, there is no risk, because you would have to have some type of very specific catastrophic event to happen, but on an average day it's like nothing to you. And the reason why I find that is to be more useful is because it's such a cost to keep a parallel environment running with and still keep them to keep them as good representatives of each other, if that makes sense. Because if the production system has anything like any other systems like metrics or third-party integrations or anything like that, then that is a surface for which the QA environment needs to have a representation of as well. In a high integration system, it's practically impossible for you to have a QA environment, because the reality is that all the other downstream or upstream systems from your system, they are gonna have to have test environments for you, like QA environments or something like that, and they're going to have test data if you're pulling data from somebody else or stuff like that. There's all these sorts of complexities that come with you having the concept of a test situation and a real situation. And there are no silver bullets here, because there are downsides of running things in production as well. Because an example would be, if you're running tests in production, well, if you're writing things like creating accounts or placing orders or something like that, these are things that are actually happening. So now you have to deal with the fallout of creating fake data, and metrics such as, like, if you do Google Analytics or something like that, is always something that you have to consider as well, because you're actually simulating a user. Now, the way that I usually handle this is that, as I said, if I own everything, if I have like this small little monolithic application, I have just like a small simple database, there are really no third-party integrations or anything like that, then a QA environment makes a lot of sense, and you don't really have to run things in production, or like you run your end-to-end test towards production. But when you are in that situation, what I usually do is that we simply run on a job. Like I actually do that these days as well. Like we have a system that has, I think, the tests run every 4 hours or 4 times a day or something like that. We could run it more than that, but it's just a job that runs through all the features that we have on the application just continuously. And then in our case, it's basically only read operations, so we don't have to think so much about persistence problems and like data pollution. But one thing that we do have to think about is like analytics, because our product owners and so forth, they're getting pings, or they get pings to Google Analytics from the bots going to the site and clicking and so forth. But as I've told the product owners, this is usually not a problem, because you can simply configure analytics and metric systems to just say, hey, anything that comes from the IP address of this bot, because we usually have a range of boxes that are going to go and do the job, right? Just exclude those things from the report. So you still, because even getting the metrics from the bot is useful, because it tells you that the metrics are actually being gathered. So if you filter them from the quote-unquote real reports, you can still verify that if you add more metrics, that those things are actually working, because the bot is now going there and doing the executing the operation, and you're actually getting metrics. Because that's also something that happens sometimes, like the PO goes to the team and says, I'm not seeing anybody using the feature, and you go, well, that's probably because nobody's using the feature. Oh, but maybe the metric, we expect this to be used. Maybe you have to double check so that, people are actually using it and like that the metrics isn't broken. I go, well, they could be using a blocker, like an ad blocker. And then the PO goes, what? Yeah, didn't you know that? That's what one of the things that they're there for. So if you think that you can tell exactly, like down to the person of who's using the site, then you're kidding yourself. It's about volume. You get a rough ballpark number. Oh, can you like stop them from having ad blockers? And then you have that whole conversation. Anywho, so what I want you to take away from this is that the long and short of it is that yes, I think that you should run your test against production every now and then. The thing about that though is that, as I said, if you have a QA environment that is very secure, or very like it's basically production, then you don't really have to do it, because it's really, do the gut feeling check. If you feel like, yeah, no, I'm not scared. If it worked in that environment, I'm not scared at all that it's gonna not work in the other environment, then you don't really have to do it. But on the other hand, if you do have a lot of integrations and a lot of inconsistencies between these two environments, then I think that you should just do the thing that I've done. Kill off the QA environment. It fills no value, because now it's just a cost that you use. And usually the software developers, anything, if there's such inconsistencies between the two, then anything that the developers are doing locally will do to validate the functionality and then do the rest of the testing in production. And the way that I usually do testing in production is with feature flags, rollbacks, things like that. And when it comes to data persistence, like if it's analytics and so forth, we filter from like the bots are usually pinging from some specific IP address. You can add some headers or something that they can filter out on, so they don't mess up the statistics or the metrics. And then when it comes to persisting records, that's a more complicated matter, but it basically comes down to that you have to know when a record is, if you're writing to your own database, it's pretty simple. You simply have to know that the client that connects is the test client, and then you add like a extra field or something like that stating that this thing here should be removed after the test run, and then you can go and clean up the records after you're done with them. And in some cases, if it's a third-party integration or things like that, where you don't want to actually do the requests themselves, well, if that is the case, then you simply don't do those external calls. It's a little bit trickier, but I've always found that if you do this correctly, it's a very, very good setup, and it gives a lot of confidence, because now you can actually continuously run things in production and get alerted as soon as something happens, as opposed to when someone finds the problem, which is a big benefit for those of us who build systems that might have features that are not used like every single minute. When you don't have a lot of users, for example, it's very difficult to get the sort of quantity so you feel confident in that you will actually know that something's broken. Sometimes you might have a hidden bug or a snake in the grass that is in production for the longest time, and you only find out after a month, because that's the time someone actually used the feature. So think about it. Have a great day.